Thank you again, Pastor Jesse. And yeah, Pastor Adam and Pastor Michelle was texting that they couldn't join this week, but they did say that they'll listen to this tomorrow. So I want to thank Pastor Adam and Pastor Michelle for giving this opportunity, because for me this is really big. If a pastor would trust you with a pulpit, it means a lot to me. So I thank them again for this.
Yeah.
So for today, I actually wanted to speak from the verse, the theme we have for this month. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. So I just want to split it into three parts. The first part being, trust in the Lord with all your hearts and lean not on your own understanding. The second part being, in all your ways acknowledge Him. And the third part obviously being, the Lord will direct your paths. So before we go into that, actually I'll be spending more time on the first part, and then I'll quickly go on the second and the third part. I know we're running behind time today. And last time when I spoke, I actually finished by 8:30. So I thought I should have more material this time, but this time. And you know how I practice my, if I have to share the word, you know how I practice it. I work in Sunnyvale, I live in Gilroy. So I start a little late so that I wait for the traffic to die down. So usually it's a 50-minute drive. So I'll start speaking. So start speaking even as I'm driving. So if somebody's watching me, they'll say, what's this guy doing, shaking his hand and things. But so I tried to time it within 50 minutes, but unfortunately I tried it 2 times. I could never finish even the first point in 40 minutes. So, but today is not the day. Actually, we are running behind time. So we'll try to go in through. But before I go into this, I wanted to share, because I really loved it when the church put it as independence. Obviously the word is coming from, you're playing around the words, because this is the month where we celebrate the independence of America. And we come from a word independence and go into a word which is independence. If you think, they're kind of the opposites. If you talk to say a teenager or an 18-year-old who's stepping out from the parents' home and living on their own, actually for them, they've been living all these years as dependents of their parents, but now they're going to go into a life of independence. No more curfew time, no more rules, they can do what they want to do. They've been adults now. So if you go in that context, it's actually a good thing to move from independence to independence. Okay, it's actually a good thing. They like this freedom. But for folks like me who are, so I was a teenager almost so many years ago. And now if I think back of those days, I would think actually all those freedom came with a price.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to freak out too. I was trying to do so many things. I was trying to use my freedom, but not everything was good. So if you ask me now, in that context, being dependent or being accountable was much better than being free. So depending on who we're going to talk to, these two words are going to mean two different things. Especially in a Christian life, before we are saved, we are free to do what we want to do. We are away from the Lord. We are free to do what we want to do. But when we go into following Christ, we are being dependent on God. So in that context, being dependent is good. But in the Christian life, before you came to Christ, sometimes you're bonded by some laws or some religions or something like that. But once you know Christ, we become free. Okay? So in that context, being independent is, having the independence is actually good. So the reason I'm trying to do this is I really loved it when the church put it in this way, taking the word from there. So I was trying to think in so many different ways. I just want to put it out there before I go into what I actually wanted to meditate for today. The first thing being, trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. Every Saturday morning, we have this Source of Fit. I would highly recommend that, because I really like coming to that. I used to be regular to that. I say the word regular because the last 2 weeks I couldn't go because I hurt my wrist. And that is something I really like, because if I start my weekend going to Source of Fit, that weekend is so good. I feel good, because sometimes even if I sleep late on a Friday, I try to wake up on a Saturday morning to come to the Source of Fit so that I'll actually enjoy my weekend. So so that was this particular day I was coming to Source of Fit. I obviously live in Gilroy, so it's a 15 to 20 minute drive. coming to the church for the classes. And that particular day, I was not feeling very good because I was trying to think about the different things that is happening in my life. I was trying to understand what is the consequence of this particular thing happening. What is the consequence of this? So I was thinking of so many different things, and none of them was actually good. One thing, you know, many of you know, I'm here on a work visa. So even though I have fulfilled every requirement that's needed to be done to get my green card, still I don't have it because my place of birth is India. So if I had been from some other country, I would have had my green card almost 4 or 5 years ago. But now it looks like it's going to be indefinite wait for it. So I was thinking about that. And then I started thinking about my career, my work. I've been with this company for 15 years, but the company is not doing good now. Then I started thinking, and that also was not looking good. I didn't want to wear you down with my sad story or whatever, but the reason I'm bringing it up is, at that point of time, I was trying to look into different places in my life, or different things that is going on in my life, and with my own understanding, I was trying to figure out what this means. I was taking this situation, I was trying to figure it out, and it did not look good. Then I started thinking about this, I was trying to figure it out, it did not look good. It could be the same with in your life too. It could be something in your family, something in your health, something in your work, or something in your neighborhood. It could be anything. And the more and more we try to figure it out, try to understand, it just leads into more worries or makes it more complex to us. That is what was happening to me on that Saturday morning. I didn't have tears in my eyes, but I would say that day I was almost like crying. And I was like, what's happening? What did I do? Why did it go wrong? And I came to the source of it, and usually Sister Carol leads the classes for us, but that particular day it was Easy who was doing it because she had to travel somewhere. The source of it, the best thing is, we do all these cardio exercises. So 1 hour of cardio exercise, end of it, you're physically fully spent. You're actually fully down physically. And that's the time they tell you to just lay down on the mat, and then they'll take a spiritual devotion for you. It's almost like 1 hour you're physically spent down, and then they have a spiritual download on you. So on that particular day, we finished our exercises at 9 o'clock. They all asked us to stay in the mat. And that day for the meditation, Izzy spoke from this verse. He spoke from this verse telling, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. When I heard that verse that particular day, obviously this is a very popular verse. We have heard it so many times in our life. But when I heard that verse that particular day, it sounded a whole lot different to me that day. Because that day when I was driving back, God was telling me, Isaac, you need to stop leaning on your own understanding. You're spending a lot of time trying to see trying to understand what you see with your natural eyes. You're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what you hear with your natural eyes. You hear this news and you try to understand it. You see this, so you're trying to put everything, all your thoughts within what you see in your natural realm. But that day God is telling me, you need to stop on that. You need to move into trusting in me. You need to start seeing life through trusting in me. In other words, what God is telling me is, Isaac, you need to stop looking into what you see naturally and start looking into what I have promised for you in the Word. Yeah. God is telling me, I have plans to prosper you. Even though you don't see it, even though it's just a promise in my Word, it will surely come into pass. So instead of you trying to figure out your life based on what you naturally see, I want you to step aside and start seeing life through my promises for you, through what my Word has spoken for you. In other words, what God is telling me is, you need to shut down worrying, seeing a natural realm, and start moving into the spiritual realm. Yeah. You need to start to figure out life. You need to stop leaning on your own understanding. You need to start trying to figure out what the season of this life means, and start looking into what I have planned for you. Because God is telling, I have a promise that I have plans to make you the head and not the tail. Suppose if you're going to through financial difficulty, there's a promise in the Word which says you will give and you will lend and not borrow. There are so many verses in the Bible which is contrary to what we see in the natural realm. So that day God was telling me, Isaac, you need to see this verse. You need to start trusting in me. You need to start seeing the unseen. You need to start believing in the unseen. You need to start to hope in the things that you start to hope in the things that I have planned for you.
Yeah.
Because a trust or faith, all it means is you need to trust in something only if you don't see it. If you see something, you don't need to trust. I don't need to trust that the light is over there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I see it. I look like an anomaly if you're going to come and tell you, I trust that the light is over there. It will look so stupid. But if I don't see something, and I tell you, I believe that God has this plan for me, then that is trust. I believe that God is going to heal me. I believe that God is going to bless this thing for me. I believe that this word of God, even though it is not present today in the natural realm, the spiritual realm, God has a plan for me. That means trust. So that day when I was driving back from Source of Faith, this is what I went back with. Isaac, you need to shift how you see things. You need to stop seeing here and start seeing here. In other words, you have this famous verse which says, walk by faith and not by sight.
Yeah.
You need to start living your life like that. And that's what God was telling me on that day. Actually you can take it a step forward. It's not only moving from the natural realm into the spiritual realm, it's also moving upwards from limitations to unlimited favor of God. I'll tell it to you. We'll go to Genesis chapter 15 and verse 5. Genesis chapter 15 and verse 5. It says, then he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you're able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. You know this context. Abraham is a man who carried the promise. God gave him the promise. We all know that when he was 75 years old, that he'll have a child. And through that child, he will bless many nations. He'll make many nations. But until he became 100 years old, he never had the child. So Abraham had this 25 years of waiting. And during this 25 years of waiting, there was this particular day where Abraham is sitting in his tent and he's telling God, he's speaking to God and telling God, you promised me so many things. You actually have given me so much wealth, but I do not have a son who's going to inherit it. He's thinking, maybe you're planning that my servant Eliezer will inherit all my wealth. So he's having all this conversation with God while he's sitting within his tent. And that is the context of this verse. If you see this verse, I want you to look at the first phrase over there that it says, then he brought him outside. So actually, Abraham is within his tent, okay? And then God brings him outside. The reason I'm telling you this is, if Abraham is within this tent, if he's seeing up from his tent, all you can see is, probably the tent was 10 feet high. All you can see is only the roof of the tent. If he sees to his left, probably he saw his wife Sarah was getting old, but he still has the promise. Or probably he saw to his right, he saw a mirror, he saw himself, and he also is getting old. And then, so within the tent, whatever Abraham sees is so limited. It's just a limited thing. He just sees his tent, he just sees his own stuff.
Yeah.
So that is why you see over here, we see God brought Abraham outside. Because when Abraham came outside and he looks up, now it's the sky. When you talk about the sky, it's unlimited.
Yeah.
The sky, just as he sang some time ago, there's billions of galaxies, billions of stars. Everything you look upon in the sky is unlimited. But when Abraham was inside the tent, everything he saw was limited. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. God is telling, Abraham, I want you to come out of the tent and start looking at the sky.
Yeah.
Because when you come out and look at the sky, you see the unlimited possibilities that I have for you. In fact, your descendants are going to be so numerous that you cannot even count, just like you cannot count the stars in the sky.
Yeah.
But Abraham, if you're going to remain within the tent, all you see is just your own work of your hand. All you see is just the things you understand. All you see is the things that you can figure out.
Yeah.
So in this way, this is the way which God is telling me that He was taking Abraham out to show the unlimited. The same way even in our life, so when we start leaning on our own understanding, then we put ourselves into a box. We put ourselves into limitations. We put ourselves into things that we think that can be achieved by your own strength. But here God is telling, you do not need to lean on your own understanding, but start trusting in me. Because when you trust in God, you're tapping into the supernatural things of God. When you trust in God, you're tapping into the unlimited things of God. When you trust in God, you're trusting in a God for whom nothing is impossible, for whom all things are possible.
Yeah.
So that is what
Amen.
And another way of going about this verse is start looking into God in whom there is no limitation.
Amen.
It's going to be supernatural with God.
Amen.
And that is what I wanted to say. So that's when I see this verse, that day it gave me a totally new meaning. Even recently, I hear any negative news, I say to myself, Isaac, stop leaning on your own understanding. Start trusting in God. Don't put and say. Sometimes you get up in the middle of the night, you start thinking about something. You go into a cold sweat or whatever it could be, or it could be some other situation. You hear a news about a family member. You hear a news about something else. You read something in the newspaper or on the news. Okay, it looks all negative to you. What I wanted to share today is stop leaning on our own understanding and start trusting in God, because through God all things are possible.
Amen.
I'll give you one more example from the Bible where I see an example where a saint of God was not leaning on his own understanding but trusting in God. That is nothing but the life of David. We all know the story of David, a very famous story. It all starts with in a very peaceful setting. He was out there in the wilderness. All he had was his sheep. He had his music instrument. He was good with the instruments. He was making songs. He was enjoying life. And for me, that's something I like, because I grew up in a city back in India, which it's highly congested, it's high traffic. Most of my life was in the cities. So if you see somebody like David who was living out in the wilderness, no people around him, it's his own life, just playing music, I kind of envy that life. That's cool. You can do what you want. It's so quiet over there. But the reason I bring it is, that's how David started out. Then one day, Prophet Samuel shows up at his home. He anoints him and tells him, you're going to be the next king. And soon, the next thing what happens is, David finds himself in the battlefield when the Israelites are facing the Philistines. And then suddenly he sees himself facing Goliath. And God helps him to kill Goliath. And overnight, he becomes a national superstar. He becomes a national hero. Okay? So he's almost like, David's life was almost like if you take the number one football player in US and you combine it with the number one Hollywood star. That's what David was. He was not only a popular man, he also was a strong man. He could actually, in fact, just to marry the king's daughter, as a sport, he'll go kill some Philistines and bring it back as a trophy. So that's what David was. And he could do what he wanted to do. Okay, his life was going in a smooth projection. And David was thinking, the prophet Samuel was so good. He told me I'll be king. See what happened to my life. I'm now the popular guy in the kingdom. And now I'm the friends with the king's son. I married the king's daughter. I have access to the palace. My family don't have to pay taxes. Things are all going cool. And that's when it all struck for David. Saul was jealous of David. And not only was he jealous, he wanted to kill David. Now forget about being the king of Israel. Now suddenly David's life turns over. He cannot even be a citizen in his own country. He has now become an outlaw. Now he's trying to run away from Saul. He's running between caves and wilderness, and things became so bad, he had to go and take refuge among the enemies of Israel. He has to go to the Philistines. Remember the same Philistines he was killing around? Yeah. He had to go and take refuge with them. And things came so bad that one day he got afraid that the Philistine king, Abimelech, would kill him. So this only way of escape is to act like a madman before Abimelech so that he will escape his life. And so he actually acted like a madman, and then Abimelech thought, what can I do with a madman, and chases him out. And that is the time he sings Psalm 34. If you actually read, if suppose the Bible had not given this introduction in the beginning of Psalm 34, you would think that David wrote Psalm 34 after he became a king. When he was in a very prosperous time in his life, when he was in a very successful time in his life. No, actually he wrote Psalm 34 in the lowest moments of his life. When he actually acted like a madman before an enemy king. And he had to hide in the wilderness, running away from his own people. And that is the time he wrote Psalm 34. The reason I'm bringing it all out is, now I'm going to take 4 verses from Psalm 34, and I can see the principle or the applied of what I just talked about. Because David in that situation, he would not see what he sees in the natural realm, but instead he would trust in God. And in that, I'm going to take 4 verses. In each of the verses, you can find that David would not talk about what is happening in the natural realm. Instead, he would tap into the supernatural realm of God. So verse number 2 in chapter 34, he says, my soul shall make his boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. If I was next to David when he said that, I'd ask, what is that to boast? What is that to boast of the Lord? You just like to act like a madman, is running away from your own people. You do not know when you're going to get killed. The soldiers of Saul are trying to find you and kill you, and you're telling me Saul is going to boast in the Lord. The only thing I can figure this verse out is, surely he was not boasting about what is happening to him unless he would boast about what God can do for him in the future. He cannot boast about what is happening in the current season of his life, but instead he chose to trust in the Lord, and he chose to boast about what God will do for him in the future. Because even then, in the situations of his life, David was probably doing like what I've been sharing today. I will not lean on my own understanding, and I will not lean on what is happening to me, what my eyes see or my ears hear. Rather, I will boast in the Lord, because he has promised he'll make me the king. He has promised he'll make me the head and not the tail. And I know that God will surely do it for me. So in faith, I will boast in the Lord. Amen. Because for him, every setback, I believe David would have thought, I know God will make me king one day, but my life is gone so bad. So how big is going to be the comeback? So David for sure knew God is surely going to fulfill the promise for him. Probably David thought, man, if God is going to bring me from this depth back to being the king, my comeback is going to be so good. So probably David was thinking, is always trusting in the Lord. I'll take the word, one more verse number 6. This poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Out of all his troubles. You think God saved him out of all his trouble at that moment of his life? No. The only trouble he got saved at that time was being saved from King Abimelech. All his other troubles were still there. Still Saul is looking for him. Still he has to be hiding in the caves. Still he has to run in the wilderness. Even though many of these problems are still not solved, still he would not confess about that. Still he would not lean on his own understanding. But still, even in that situation, one day God will save me out of all my troubles. One day, surely all these troubles, I will surely trust in the Lord, who will save me out of all his troubles. So that's his trust. So he's talking about things that is going to happen to him as if it already happened. That is what I told you. If only they did not give this introduction in the Psalm 34, we would think David wrote this psalm when he became the king. But he wrote it in the lowest moment of his life. 2 more verses I want to share with you. Verse number 7. The angel of the Lord encamps around all those who fear him and delivers them. I surely believe that obviously David did not see the angels of the Lord physically. Obviously in the natural eyes he's not seeing the angels. But in the eyes of trust, he knew that God would send his angels to encamp around him. And that is what he's confessing over here. So over and over, I would encourage you, later on next time you read Psalm 34, I want you to read it through the lens of Proverbs 3 and 5. Through the lens of the verse telling, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And if you start reading Psalm 34 with that lens, it gives us a whole lot different meaning. And that encourages us. Because even we could be going to different situations in our life. We could be waiting for our next promise of God to be fulfilled in our life. At that point of time, we could be like the psalmist and say, the angels of the Lord encamps around me. Even though I do not see them, I trust the Lord that he will do it for me. One more verse I wanted to close with this particular thing. Verse number 10. The young lions lack and suffer hunger, but those who seek the Lord shall not lack any good thing. So David is telling, I might be alone in the wilderness. So obviously he's not going to find a safe way, he's not going to find you're not going to find anything in the wilderness, nothing. All you're going to see is the stones and sand over there. But even then he tells, God will make sure I will lack no good thing. So even in my time of the wilderness, even in my waiting time, God will make sure I will lack no good thing. Just like the children of Israel, 40 years they were in the wilderness, waiting for the promise to be fulfilled, or waiting to go into the promised land. You see the word, not one of the clothes were torn, not one of them fell sick. So that is what God is promising. Even in the waiting time, David is telling, I trust in the Lord. Even though I do not see anything around me in the natural realm, I believe in my God. I trust in the Lord, who will make sure I lack no good thing. So that is what I wanted to say first about this verse. That always it's just the way how we're going to look at, how we choose to look at things. whether we want to look at the things we naturally see or trust in God, who will make sure you lack no good thing. So even during this waiting time, all God is asking of us is just trust in Him. Do not worry yourself by seeing what you naturally see. Because God is telling, even in this waiting time, I'm doing something beautiful in your life. Even during this waiting time, I'm taking you through this phase. That's my purpose. I take you through this phase of this waiting time because I'm doing something beautiful in your life. And God is telling, I'll take you to this verse, John chapter 13 and verse 7. John 13 and verse 7. It says, Jesus answered and said to him, what I'm doing, you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Here the context is, Jesus is, we know the story where Jesus tries to wash the feet of the disciples, and Peter says, God, I do not want you to do this for me. And Jesus replies with this verse. He's telling, Peter, I'm doing something in your life now. You do not understand it now, but later on, when you become the apostle, and when I use you to reach so many thousands of people, you will learn this lesson. Obviously, here Jesus was teaching him the lesson of humility, of being humble. And later on, we see how transformed Peter was. The same way, even in your waiting time, when you trust in the Lord, when you believe in the Lord, all God wants you to believe is, even in that time, He's doing something beautiful in your life. You might not understand it now, but God is telling you, one day when the promise gets fulfilled, you will understand why I got you through this path. So that is what I want to tell you. When you're going to trust in the Lord and not lean out on your own understanding, believe not only God is going to fulfill His promises for you, but also even this time is doing something beautiful in your soul. And later on you will turn back, look upon this season and thank God for it. Because He might have taught you lessons that you would have never learned anywhere else. He could have made you a stronger Christian. He could have made you a man filled with faith. He could have molded you into a champion of faith during this waiting time. So God is telling you, I'm doing something beautiful with you. Just trust in me. You might not understand it now, but just trust in me because I have plans for you. So that is the first thing I wanted to say on trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. Now quickly, having said all this, now I'll quickly go to the remaining two parts of what I wanted to share today. In the second part is, in all your ways, acknowledge Him. For somehow in the Christian life, when you're living a life of faith, when you're living a life of following Jesus, God is telling, it is going to be a continuous process. And God is telling, in all your ways. In all your ways means in everything. Yeah. Right from you get up, you take your car and go to work, as normal as it looks, as easy as it looks, to the biggest prayer point you have in your life, or biggest thing you're praying for, whatever it could be, in everything. And if you're going on a vacation or going to work, or just staying back at home, whatever you're doing, God is telling, in all your ways, acknowledge me. Or in other words, in all your ways, believe that I am there watching over you. In all your ways, believe that I am there making things perfect for you. In all your ways, acknowledge me. To explain that, I just took this passage from Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 10 to 12. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 10 to 12. For the land which you go to possess is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you have sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden. But the land which you cross over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of the heaven. A land for which the Lord your God cares. The eyes of the Lord your God are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the very end of the year. Here God is explaining to the children. Here the context is, the children of Israel were as slaves in slaves in Egypt for so many years, and now in the transition time, they're still in the wilderness. Now God is going to take them next into the promised land, into Canaan. And this is the time where they're going to just step into Canaan. These are kind of the final instructions that God is giving the children of Israel. At this point of time, He's trying to compare how farming was done in Egypt and how farming is going to happen in Canaan. So He's telling, in Egypt is almost like a plains. It's almost like deserts, it's a plains. That is telling, you could store your water and you could plant your water. You can irrigate and you can plant your own garden. You can have your own vegetable garden. But the land in which I'm going to take you is filled with mountains and valleys. So obviously it's going to be difficult storing water over there. So there God is telling me, this is a special land because I